Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Castlevania Legacy of Darkness commentary. We are finally in original content territory. By which I mean, the stuff only Carrie gets to do. As you might remember from Reinhardt's playthrough, after you fight the big fuck-off behemoth boss at the end of Castle Center, you get a second boss fight that's character-specific, which sets up your rival confrontation up in the Room of Clocks. Well, for this playthrough, our rival is Actrice, who is a sort of important character, but never even appears in Reinhardt's story. It's weird, because you get at least one glimpse of Rosa in Carrie's story, but then she just vanishes off the face of the earth, and you're dealing with Actrice for the rest of the playthrough. But, Reinhardt doesn't even get a glimpse of Actrice. We had to play Cornell's campaign for that.
Is Reinhardt's rival in Cornell's playthrough?
Reinhardt's rival in Cornell... Well, Reinhardt's rival is Death, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. So, okay, fair.
Actrice is the second half of the Gil de Rais Actrice duo that was cribbed from history for this story. We did get some comments during the Cornell playthrough explaining more about that. Apparently, Gil de Rais was oh geez, I don't remember what was said, but something about how it was likely his crimes were exaggerated because he was in the he was like on the church's shit list for some reason. But like he was accused.
The Christian church exaggerating someone's deeds in order to make them look like the good guys. I'm shocked. Shocked, I say.
He was accused, and I think he admitted to killing a bunch of children. So that would be the reason this plot involves a bunch of children being kidnapped.
Merry Christmas.
Admitting to killing a lot of children when the church forces you to doesn't necessarily mean you actually did it.
Yes.
That was a thing. This goes back all the way through history. Like Joan of Arc, for example. She died when the British kidnapped her, and they basically forced her to say that she made up the stuff that she had seen about being like hearing God's voice and stuff like that. I could be getting some of the details wrong. It's been a while since I've looked up my Joan of Arc history, granted, but the Spanish Inquisition's whole deal was torturing people until they said what you wanted them to say, so you stop torturing them. Turns out that didn't work. They just keep torturing you anyway.
Yes. Anyway, our boss fight for the Castle Center is Actrice's vampire thrall, who is an unnamed Fernandez warrior, one of Carrie's ancestors. I for some reason, my brain always catches on ancestors. Like, is it ancestor or descendant? And I shouldn't get confused by that, because descendant means, descending from a line. So that's further downstream, not upstream. But I don't know why. My brain always catches on that. And I always have to ask myself the question. I think it's because when I read, like, amateur writing by fan fiction authors and stuff, they always mix the two words up. And I've been exposed to the wrong word being used for the wrong thing so often that it actually confuses my brain.
So two things. One, I like that the boss fights with similar magic to you for rival purposes. That's neat. Second question, though, is there actually a way to dodge those homing balls? Because they look impossible to dodge.
They will fade after a little while the same way yours will if the enemy manages to run away from them. The problem is, the only enemy in the game that is likely to ever run away from your homing shot is actually the boss you fight right before this, so that's actually kind of clever. So the behemoth boss might actually show you how to avoid those homing shots. But, like, the only way to outrun them is to keep jumping. If you keep jumping, you will eventually outrun the homing shots. also jump past them, not away from them, so that they have to spend time turning around to chase you.
Oh, I see. So, like, when they were heading for them, you wanted to, like, jump over them so that they have to do a loop-de-loop around. Okay.
Yeah. Now, the bluer ones actually home in on you more precisely than the yellow ones. So those bluer ones are the ones that are harder to dodge. But anyway, this isn't a super hard boss. It's just, it's actually a boss fight that will give you a run for your money, unlike Rosa, who, as we saw in the Reinhardt playthrough, he just kind of whipped into submission in under 10 seconds. It wasn't a particularly challenging boss fight.
So, this is, I know, just kind of, like, I see you throwing the holy water. It just makes me wonder that if you ever, like, went into Dracula's castle with a fire truck, right? And you just filled that sucker with holy water and used a fire hose. Like, how successful do you think Jeff Belmont,
well, I mean, if the blessing doesn't kill them, the PSI will.
Okay, remember how in the Netflix series, the first few floors of Dracula's castle basically got flooded with holy water?
Oh, I forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah, the castle got parked in that port town. Carmilla did this whole thing with an undead priest and holy water, and it basically flooded the first few floors of the castle. And that was her big play. It was actually kind of genius.
I'm actually surprised that the undead priest was able to do that.
It's not just the undead priest, it's the undead bishop, which confuses me even more. You're telling me that not only could that priest actually create holy water, but he could do it while undead. How the hell does God decide?
It doesn't matter if you're in front of God.
You
God doesn't care.
God gets a message. It's like, hey, boss. They're asking for some holy water, but there's something a little weird about whatever.
Is it Jim Carrey up there? Is he just answering yes to all?
I'm busy. Listen, my soaps are on. All right.
Anyway, for some reason, instead of the Medusa heads on this bridge, you get these ghosts, which are a lot easier to run past. I don't know why they think that the Medusa heads should be a Reinhardt exclusive enemy, but they seem to.
A homing attack might trivialize them. Like, their weird movement and pattern is part of what makes them difficult, and having a homing shot might make them a non-issue. I don't know why you would replace them with an enemy that's also a non-issue, but, you know.
But there were so many of them that the homing shot, you can only target one at a time, you know.
Yeah. I'm just, this area is cool. Yeah, like.
The Tower of Science is a level I actually want to talk about, though, because this is the only level in the game where I kind of feel like the original level in Vanilla 64 was better. And I don't just mean in the sense that the level design was great, but it performed badly, like in the case of the Tower of Execution. I mean, I actually enjoyed playing through the original Tower of Science more than I liked playing through this version of it. It still opens up on this kind of tower platforming sequence, although the obstacles that you need to get through are a bit different there. But once you get to the top of the tower, there are a lot of these science-y rooms with experiment tubes and ceiling turrets, and the camera gets all like up in the turret's perspective so that you have to run around to avoid it, and it's very striking. The only thing that I don't like about the original level is that there are a lot of bottomless pits that you have to make really precise jumps with fixed cameras to get by. So it can be an annoying level to play through if you're not like really in tune with the game's controls. But other than that, I feel like it was just more memorable as a level, you know?
So, you know what? I don't know why I keep thinking about Shadow the Hedgehog today, but I am. Like, one of the only interesting, like, level like set pieces I can remember from Shadow the Hedgehog is in one of the gun levels. You're running through, and then you'll eventually go into a room where you're seeing the room from the security camera's point of view, and it's like, oh, that's neat. But since it's such a sharp change in camera angle, and Shadow the Hedgehog controls like ass, it doesn't really work.
Oh no!
Oh,
well,
God! That's a morbid.
That's a
way
Mortal
to
Kombat stage fatality. Yeah.
So here's the thing. Like, everything else in this game is, obviously fantasy, so it's more removed. Like, okay, you die to a skeleton boss, or you get lit on fire, or whatever. Like, okay, that's, like, obviously gruesome in its own way, but not super realistic, so it doesn't affect us as much. Children getting caught in science machinery and torn into pieces is part of the reason why we have modern labor laws. So,
You're not wrong.
It's a little much to see it here, I have to say. Oh my god.
I like Carrie's slide move, how she just goes onto her belly. It's like I can tell that they were inspired by Maria Renard when they made that, but like,
yeah, it does look. It's definitely the most comical of her animations, I would have to say.
It's one of the ways that Maria would slide. I say one of the ways because for some reason Maria had two slides. Like, she would go on, she would slide on her belly, and I think she had a roll, didn't she? Like, she could just roll infinitely, basically.
Yeah, she did.
Was that the proto backdash where it was faster just to roll everywhere?
It was, yes. Mostly because you were just doing like flips the entire time instead of walking.
Yeah, it's I've seen playthroughs of Maria's campaign where she just rolls literally everywhere. The thing is, I don't actually know how to trigger the roll instead of the belly slide. Nope. Oh, damn
yeah,
it!
Sometimes you see that first one was morbid and too realistic for my tastes. That one was just a Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote death.
Okay, so the Tower of Science is one of those levels that I haven't played all that often compared to the others, because it's actually quite a lot different than its Castlevania 64 counterpart, and the only people who go through it are Carrie and Cornell, who I haven't played as often as I have Reinhardt.
Well, that's similar for lots of games like this where you play as multiple characters. Like, if any of them have their own unique stages, you're going to know them less well than the stages everybody plays, unless if you really only play the game as one character. Like in Sonic and Knuckles, if you only ever play as Knuckles, then the Knuckles exclusive area of Mushroom Hill, you're going to know that fine. But if you play the game as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles an equal amount, then the Knuckles section's going to be less familiar for you.
Yeah. Oh. It's just, these conveyor belts are deceptively difficult to navigate because they keep changing up their direction, and the timing on the spike boxes being dispensed onto the conveyor belt is a little tricky to get your head around. And this one's like, you go straight from a conveyor belt that's going in the other direction to one that's going forward, and so you're suddenly speeding up, and it's just like, oh no, I overshot and slid into the abyss. Help. I like platforming challenges like this, and I wish the game, like, I appreciate kind of like the sort of pacing mix-up that the game plays, with an explorative villa, then a platformy underground level, then an explorative castle center, and then a series of platformy levels up until the end game. It does try to mix up its pacing a little, but the game is at its strongest when it is a platformer.
Yeah, it's one thing that surprised me the most while I was watching this playthrough is I always just kind of assumed that Castlevania 64 would have kind of a clunky feel control-wise to it. And your playthrough, at the very least, has made it look much smoother and more fun to play than I would have just assumed just by looking at it normally.
You know, surprisingly, I think that maybe the game's bad reputation for control came partly from the way how, at the time, the expectation for 3D games was tank controls. Believe it or not. On the N64, Mario was pioneering full analog control, which would prove to be the wave of the future. But at the time, tank controls were considered so normal that when, I think, Rayman or maybe one of the spin-off games that's like Rayman tried to have analog control, the publishers were like, no, you're crazy. Tank controls all the way, man.
Was that Croc? Because Croc has tank controls. I don't think
Croc has
Rayman...
tank controls, yeah.
No, it wasn't Croc. It was one of the Rayman or Rayman adjacent games.
Because I think Rayman 2 has normal analog controls.
Yeah, but there was like another N64 game that was like Rayman by the same developers, but not actually Rayman.
I couldn't tell you, unfortunately.
I always forget the name, but I have a game in my head that I remember seeing a lot of ads for back then.
But yeah, no, it's just one of those things where if you weren't around at the time, it seems so obvious. But it's like, no, we had to figure this out the hard way. That tank controls, not the best. Honestly, it's shocking to me how, long it took some games to drop out of tank controls. Like Resident Evil 4 still technically has tank controls. It's just a different viewpoint. So it's like, and that game came out in like 2005.
Well, tank controls for fixed camera angles was a decent choice, and still is to this day, to be honest, because it does help you manage the changing camera angles more effectively than regular full analog.
The remasters offer a full analog, and I can't do it.
Wow.
Because the fucking controls get weird whenever the camera angle changes, which in a pre-rendered game is all of the time.
Well, yeah, in Resident Evil especially, the camera is pulled in so damn close that it's changing every couple of seconds if you're moving around with any kind of speed. It's a little easier with something like Devil May Cry to work that sort of full analog control in, because the camera is necessarily pulled back to fit all the combat. So the camera isn't changing as rapidly in those games, But Resident Evil, nah, I need my tank controls. I need my tank controls in classic Resident Evil. It just doesn't feel right without it.
Yeah, but you also have stuff like Tomb Raider had tank controls or some sort of variation thereof, and
yeah, well, Tomb Raider had tank controls because because the console it was made for didn't have an analog stick at first.
Yeah. It's just one of those.
Tomb Raider's old.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think I am interested in getting the remastered versions. I don't think I could ever play the original PlayStation 2.
Well, in the case of the Tomb Raider games, on the remasters, analog controls actually work quite well. The only kind of downside to using the analog controls in the Tomb Raider remasters, I find, is that when you turn to jump to another platform, your character will physically snap to that direction and jump forward. Whereas if you were playing with the tank controls as originally designed, you would be doing all kinds of side hops and stuff to change direction, and it looks and feels a lot more acrobatic that way.
Yeah, that does make sense, and it's unfortunate that they weren't able to come up with a way to emulate that feel.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it's the only downside to using the modern control scheme in those remasters is that you don't get to see and feel all the cool acrobatic moves that Lara is capable of.
Yeah, but I'm looking at what you're doing here, and obviously it's not looks acrobatic because you're just jumping, but this is much more fast-paced and interesting platforming than I had assumed the original. What the hell are you doing?
Why did you do you were trying to BLJ, weren't you?
No, I was trying to catch the ledge and drop down. The thing is, I forgot to account for the amount of fall damage that I would take pulling that maneuver off, because I don't want to platform back through all this stuff, that would just be annoying. So what I mean,
the platforming looks legitimately pretty fun for what
Christ, we're talking about Tomb Raider. This is Tomb Raider shit.
The thing is, dropping down from here loses you most of your health. I have enough healing items that I don't really care. I just forgot to heal before trying to drop down the first time,
I'm in so much pain.
I like benders.
Gonna eat this chumpkin.
Also, you're not quite right, John, because if you tried something like that in Tomb Raider, you would just fucking die.
You say that, but it wasn't that long ago, but I was looking up long plays of the original Tomb Raider, and the final fucking level, like that temple, has you doing some of the most insane shit. Like the most insane logic reaches to progress that you might as well be doing shit like that on the norm.
Well, yeah, the later levels in Tomb Raider do tend to stretch the grid-based platforming design to their limit.
Yeah.
Requiring you to do all kinds of flippy-dippy bullshit to overcome just in the normal intended progression of the levels. You'll have to slide down a thing and then do a backwards flip and then hop off of another slanted wall and then grab a ledge, and that's the way the level's designed. It's not even a speedrunning trick.
I'm just imagining that meme of the two hands shaking, and one is Lara Croft, one is Sora, and then in the middle it's this flippy dippy bullshit.
Okay, but no flippy dippy bullshit here, because this boss, I don't understand. Okay, this boss was not in the original Tower of Science. The Tower of Science did not have a boss fight in the original. For some reason, they added a boss, but it only really seems to be challenging at all when you're fighting it as Cornell, because Carrie can just do this. Take out the first two turrets and then jump up and down, shooting homing projectiles at it.
Stop.
It's they have the crystal from Final Fantasy in there. I just like that Dracula was sick of people breaking into his house and installed a Gatling gun security system. You know,
The Belmonts keep stealing my Amazon packages.
What's interesting is that the boss itself is this crystal in the middle, and that the stage immediately after this is the Tower of Sorcery, a stage made entirely out of crystal. So it's like the Tower of Science is researching something that they discovered in whatever the Tower of Sorcery is supposed to be. It's an interesting potential story niggle. Unfortunately, since this is Castlevania 64, the story is extremely underpresented, so we don't actually get any information on what that's about.
I
It's
just find that
something
interesting.
you
It's
can
like
infer.
Dracula comes back home from vacation, his house has changed, and it's just like, oh, there's an archaeological site in my house now. Neat.
Yeah. But, you know, that's the sort of thing, that's the sort of level environment-based storytelling that I associate with, like, Crash Bandicoot or Sonic the Hedgehog, you know? Where you can infer some level of context about what all these wacky level themes are supposed to be doing by looking at how they connect to each other. Like, when in Scrap Brain Zone Act 3, you fall into the Labyrinth Zone for the final act, and it's like, oh, this place is built on top of these ruins. That's neat. And then Crash Bandicoot did the same thing, except you could see it more clearly because it has a world map. Ugh. Okay, so these are basically the blood slime things, except they're made of crystal.
Yep, they're made of crystal or ice. Is this crystal or is it ice?
This is crystal.
It's crystal. Okay.
Yeah, this is the Tower of Sorcery. It's a stage made entirely of croc crystal. I call it croc crystal because it reminds me of because it reminds me of a level theme from Croc and also of the secret final boss in Croc.
I was gonna say the secret final boss is a dead ringer for it. Yeah.
There's a secret final boss in Croc.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's like this weird crystal doppelganger of what's his face, the actual
The Baron.
Yeah, the Baron.
Yeah. Okay. You
It's
see,
like it comes out of fucking nowhere. Like
this is just, my experience where I don't get the appeal of Croc because I think that game's not good. So it's just like,
It's okay. I like Croc, and the remaster makes it better because you can just play with regular ass controls as God intended. I do not think that Croc is a game that needs its tank controls. It is one of the exceptions to that rule, where the tank controls are just kind of there and don't really do anything except make the level design simpler because the levels are designed around tank controls.
in retrospect, I agree that Croc is nothing that special. I have fondness for it because it got me at a very young age, and it was released way before there was even a Banjo-Kazooie or DK64.
I have nostalgia for Croc as well. But it's a weird
I
kind
was
of...
more getting on to Ted. Like Ted, was saying they don't understand the appeal, and I think it's just because it was one of the first 30 platformers I played on the PlayStation.
and then there is merit. There is merit in that. I should also say, if it's kind of like. So we're recording this before Christmas, so that's where this context is coming from. But my parents have all of this nostalgia for the stop motion Rankin Bass cartoons, Christmas cartoons. And if you've grown up with any modern sensibilities at all and are over the age of 4, those cartoons are really bad. But if if you've grown up with them and have associated this like childlike wonder with them, and where like my parents explained like, oh, they only showed once a year and you had to be at the TV at this specific time, otherwise you missed it. It was the same thing they said with Sound of Music and Wizard of Oz as well, only those movies are actually good. So, I can understand wanting to make sure that you were home the night that they played. I understand that desire now. But for the Rankin Bass cartoons, no thanks. But like, again, if you grew up with that, then sometimes these things aren't logical, and that's okay.
Okay, so to talk about the game for 20 seconds, Tower of Sorcery is another level that was redesigned between the two games. Unlike Tower of Science, which I have mixed opinions on and feel like the original was better, Tower of Sorcery is just a straight up improvement, and not even for reasons like previous levels that I've mentioned where it was like, oh, this level was so annoying, or this level performed like shit. No, the original Tower of Sorcery was just boring. It was the same. You see those red fade in, fade out platforms in the background right now? Those ones? The level was almost entirely made of these. It took forever to get through. It was comically boring.
This definitely is the most intricate the platforming has gotten throughout the entire game so far.
Yeah. The Tower of Sorcery is weird in that it feels like a Super Mario level.
It does feel like a super. This is
See, Tower of Sorcery, that's Disney.
I mean, yeah, it does kind of have like a Fantasia vibe, I guess.
It's the color palette, I think, like the very like blue and purple kind of vibe.
No, you know what this is? This is Kingdom Hearts. It's even got church windows in the background.
Oh my god, it is Kingdom Hearts. Jeez Christ.
Anyway, this is a lot easier to get through as Carrie than as Cornell, because Cornell has a range limitation on his attack, so he has to get pretty close to these crystals in order to target them. With Carrie, you can just fire off homing shots like the moment you get close enough, and I messed that up there. Am I about to wipe out? I don't remember.
Yes, you are. Wipe out.
You got Castlevania there. True ass back, hit stun, knock back into the pit Castlevania level design. Gotta love it. It does definitely seem like, that this character is intended to be the easier mode of the game, just because having such a drastic range makes a lot of the combat and platforming a lot more simple.
Well, I mean, it's more like this level is designed with damn it. This level is designed with Carrie's range in mind because it's a Carrie level. So it's not like her range makes the level easier. It's more like Cornell's lack of range makes the level harder because the level wasn't designed with him in mind. It's this last challenge that always gets me as Cornell, because you have these two vanishing platforms, and you need to get like closer before the lock-on will target that last shockwave crystal on the final platform. It's easier to do this as Carrie because you don't have to actually like aim at the crystal. You can just fire off a homing shot the moment you see the lock-on indicator and you're fine. But with Cornell, his projectile always goes straight out from the direction he's facing or at the thing that he's homing attacking at, and it is quite possible to miss.
Thankfully, it looks like it shoots somewhat infrequently, so you might be able to just time it.
Yeah, it's a fairly simple timing puzzle. That's why I say it's easier as Carrie, because Carrie doesn't have to worry about it so much.
Oh, that one was short.
Yeah, it is fairly short. It was physically, like in terms of the actual distance covered during gameplay, quite short in the original game as well. But it took a while because you kept having to wait for platforms to fade in and fade out and fade in and fade out. It was boring. I hate that level. And I've seen people say that Castlevania 64's versions of all the changed levels are just uniformly better across the board. No. fucking no.
No,
Wait,
I-
really?
it's not.
I can see people liking the Tower of Execution in the original, especially if as I suspect it runs better on emulator than it does on native hardware, because it's pretty bad on the N64. But the Tower of Science is interesting, but also very challenging because of all those precise jumps over bottomless pits. I wish they had kept that design and just replaced the bottomless pits with things that you could land in and climb out of. That would have fixed it, pretty much. Tower of Sorcery in the original game was boring. And Dual Tower in the original game was bullshit. I don't like the original Dual Tower at all.
It's interesting to me, like, you've got this story confrontation here, so that's a little... But, like, there seems to be a lot more emphasis on the world building and story in the first half of the game than the second half of the game. From what I can tell, like, you're talking to people more often, you're exploring more often. The second half seems much more linear than the first half.
I get the feeling that that's a product of the game's like direction having to be more streamlined partway through development because they were behind and they had to get something onto store shelves in time for Christmas or whatever. I forget what month this game released in. I think it was during the holiday season though.
Oh, that's when they would want it to come out because that's where the money is.
Anyway, Actrice, Dingo Dial wants his style back.
The crystals.
It's literally Dingo Dial's crystal barrier. Like, just it's straight up.
Bring out the butter. I'm gonna kill a child.
Actually, now that I think about it, what year was Crash Warped released?
99. No, I think it's 99.
If it's 99, then this game did it first. Oh my god.
It has a demo for Spyro 1
let
on
me go
it,
check.
so whatever, those two came out the same year, so I think it's 98.
Crash,
Yep.
1998.
No, it was 98. It was
1998. November 3rd.
It was only a year after, too. Holy shit. Okay.
All right, let me check. What year did this come out? Okay, I need to actually open my web browser.
1999. Wow, such a ripoff, man. I can't believe. Castlevania Legacy of
64 ripped off of Crash Bandicoot 1.
Okay, so Crash Bandicoot 3 was October 31st, 1998, and Castlevania 64 was it was January 26th, 1999.
It's actually it's interesting. This game came out the same year. This game came out. Legacy of Darkness came out December 8th, 1999, and the original Castlevania 64 came out January 1999. So it actually came out in the U.S. before Japan, which is also unusual. So they basically, once the first game released, they were basically immediately starting on this remaster, which is interesting because that also came out.
The January release date makes me think that they missed the holiday deadline.
Yeah.
But still had to release something within a given time frame, realizing though it's not what we entirely had in mind, which is why Legacy of Darkness wasn't that long after. It's
always games released in January often to me feel like games that publishers have little faith in. That's obviously more of a modern.
I mean, that dates back to
thing,
movies too.
like,
So
yeah. Well, movies.
Yeah. I like the idea that you have little faith in a project, so you release it during the month where it is less likely to succeed.
Yes, exactly. It's baffling to me.
The logic behind it though is because there's less competition in January, February than trying to risk a summer release where all of the big name movies are. Because then your movie makes no money.
Yeah, but it's like it compounds a lot of the time with lack of marketing and lack of, any effort to sell a thing.
Yeah.
And not that games can't be successful released to that period. Like Fire Emblem Awakening was released in like January or February. And that game sold like hotcakes. And there's millions of examples.
Well, yeah, there have been successful examples of stuff that released during January, but the success usually comes in later months, you know? Like Elder Scrolls 1 released in January. It didn't actually successfully sell until months later, after word of mouth had had time to spread. And I have a feeling that Fire Emblem Awakening was kind of a similar case.
It did have a bigger like hype period at the beginning than a lot of other Fire Emblem games, because Nintendo actually bothered to advertise the damn thing.
Well, you know, that always helps. Konami.
Yeah, but it did also, like, Fire Emblem Awakening also had legs, which was important.
It didn't have feet, though.
No, it did not have feet, but it did have legs.